Is the web designer market saturated? Well, this is a question that every single aspiring web designer will ask me. So when they see that my content on YouTube and they see all of these people who are already getting results, they think, oh, well, if they're doing it and they're successful, then I'm probably not going to have my pick of the clients. It's probably not worth me starting. But what they're doing is looking at it all wrong. So to give you the short answer, if you want to just click off after this, no, it's not saturated. The amount of web designers in comparison to the amount of web design projects is widely, what would even be the word? The ratio is way off. So basically, there aren't enough web designers to supply the amount of websites that clients want. So in particular, when I work in Squarespace, people think, oh, well, Squarespace is such a small niche. And in this video, I'm going to talk about web design at large, but just quickly to go into Squarespace. People think, oh, maybe there's 100 projects a month within Squarespace. In reality, there's thousands. So with Squarespace alone, they are, I think, the third biggest website hosting platform in the world, which means they've got millions of sites. And who's going to build all of these sites? I feel like I've said this in so many videos, and yet people still ask me. I build roughly 150 sites every year. You take out that 150, we make a lot of money from that, and there's still about 1 million projects ready to go every year. I mean, 1 million might be a slight stretch considering Squarespace has been around 20 years, but the market share continues to grow, as does the amount of people coming into the ecosystem. And it's the exact same for the market as a whole. Every single business needs a website. More and more individual sort of solopreneurs are waking up to the fact that a Instagram profile isn't going to cut it. TikTok profile is not going to cut it. They need a website. People are realizing this. So it's not saturated whatsoever. However, people are looking at AI as well. So it's not just designers that you're competing with, it's also AI. And people are like losing their minds, like, oh, well, is AI going to come and take my job? Well, possibly. So for the low effort, let's call them low effort designers, AI, yeah, it's going to probably do as good, if not a better job than if you just have a template and you just try and hand that off to a client immediately. So it's really, really important to make a distinction. It's going to wipe out, so AI is probably, if not definitely, going to wipe out like the bottom 10 to 20% of designers and web designers at large, because AI is already like pretty good at making a website from a simple sentence prompt. However, once you've done that prompt and so I actually had to play around with an app called, I think it's called Lovable, and you can put a prompt in and it will make a site. However, if that site isn't perfect, it's really, or at least I find it really hard to prompt it in such a way that it becomes a usable, decent website. So if a client can't brief a AI builder, then they're stuck. And they need someone, a human, who can come in, who can understand their needs and almost act as their brain. Clients don't know what they don't know. And this is where the human aspect comes in. So I wouldn't worry about AI taking your job, first of all, because it will only wipe out, as I say, the bottom, right at the bottom in terms of designers. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about the amount of designers. There's just still not enough. So that's going to frame the whole rest of the video. And I've got tons of notes up here that I'm going to go through, but short answer is no. Now I'll get into the longer answer now. So you're right at the start. Let's say you are the person who asked me this question. If you're on this video, well, you might well be. I assume are going to be roughly towards the start of your web design career. So how do you get out of that 20%? How do you rise above? Well, first off is you're going to have to start in that 20%. You don't just roll into the web design industry and start commanding 2K per project. You don't automatically, have the pick of the client. You have to take on the for want of a better word, the shitty clients, the ones who have no idea what they want. They're going to bust your chops for the majority of the project. They're not going to be happy, until the 15th revision. You're going to have to cut your teeth on these horrible projects, because these type of clients, they are not going to be able to use AI, and they probably are going to get turned away by most of the designers because they just don't want to work with them because they're too much of a headache. So your competitive advantage, number one, could be or should be trying to work with these clients. So you'll find them on Upwork, you'll find them on LinkedIn, you'll find them on mostly jobs boards where they're putting out a request for a proposal, so an RFP, and they're saying, hey, I want basically the lowest bidder. That's what they're looking for, the lowest bidder with at least a decent amount of competency. Competency, honestly, comes secondary to price. So with these people, as long as you're the cheapest, as long as you're responsive, and as long as eventually you can learn to give them what they want, then you're a shoo-in. So if you're thinking, well, I'm just starting, how do I stand out? Do that. Be cheapest, work with the worst clients. The way I see this, I call it paid practice. So it's what I've done when I started out. And essentially what it was is my thinking was, I am not going to get paid very much for this, maybe $5 or $10. And, the client, they're going to, like I said before, bust me chops, bust me balls for the whole project. But I would pay 50 times what they're paying me for this level of education. So the worst clients are the best teachers. They tell you what not to do. They show you how to deal with confrontation in a project. They show you all of the things, or they ask for the things that most people wouldn't, and they make you go above and beyond. And all of this teaches you how to be the ultimate people-pleasing business owner. Now, people will say, oh, you shouldn't be a people-pleaser. Well, all right, yeah, maybe in normal life you shouldn't be. But if you go above and beyond for every client and they're eventually happy with what you give them, which is like 99% of clients, then you're going to get stellar reviews. You're going to learn quicker than any course could ever teach you. And then as you up your rates, generally the level of client or the type of client is much better. And so you get this weird inverse effect where you earn more money, but it gets easier. So your level of difficulty goes down, but the level of money goes up. And this is what I find now is when I have a client who pays me like 20, 25K for a website, it doesn't get drawn out over like 8 months. What it does is it will go so efficiently. They'll have all the content ready. Maybe it'll take a month or 2 months. We'll do a design phase, build phase. Most of their feedback is just, hey, can we change this image? Hey, maybe can we tweak this headline? And everything else is great. We hired you as the professional. Go away and do professional stuff. We trust you. That is the type of client that eventually you will attract. But you only attract that type of client after going through the just hordes and hordes of terrible or difficult clients at the start. So that's how you stand out initially. And honestly, that's the biggest thing. That alone will probably get you out of that bottom rung where you're easily replaceable and you just have no edge. You don't stand out over anyone. Do that one thing, or I guess that was a collection of things, and you can then start focusing on other areas of the business, other areas of how you get ahead. So can you be cheaper than AI? Can you be cheaper than everyone else? Can you be easier to work with and more responsive than everyone else and AI? Basically, you want to be pitching yourself against, it's funny because when I started teaching, AI wasn't even in the conversation. This was like 2, maybe 3 years ago. It was somewhat in the background, but it wasn't like a major player. And so we have to now sort of think of AI in the same breath as our competitors. So we're not just going up against designers, it's AI. So can you be cheaper? Difficult, but possible than both. Now, the main thing, I've touched on this towards the start, but the main thing is going to be the human element. People get frustrated when they talk to ChatGPT and it's not giving them exactly what they want because they don't know how to talk to him. And a lot of people don't. So if you can be the person who converses with a client and helps them understand why you're doing what you're doing with the design, and not just listen to their brief, but improve upon it and use your own initiative to create things to, I think it's like, there's a saying, is it surprise and delight? If you can surprise and delight a client, turn their ideas into something tangible, into something that's not just basically garbage that's auto-generated, then you stand out. And you can even begin to build relationships with those clients. I found that in the early days, the cheaper clients, actually, they'd have a lot of different things going on. And so we'd do, a one pager, and then they'd say, oh, in fact, there's a guy who had a laundromat business. Oh, can we do a laundromat business? Oh, I've also got a payment processing business. Let's do something with this. Because they know they can trust you, A, to deliver on time, on brief, and they know that you're cheap and you're responsive. If you nail those things with a client, they're never, ever going to look anywhere else. They wouldn't even consider trying to use an AI builder, and they wouldn't even consider going back out into the market to send out a RFP, so a request for proposal, because they have you. The only thing that would change that would be if you raise your rates, which you should do, but maybe with your older clients, don't raise them too much. Or if you just stop doing what you do. There's no other reason why a client would stray from you as their service provider. And that is how you stack. So, you can stand out, but then you need to stack sort of more regular clients and proof of concept, because things get even easier once you have a portfolio behind you. These types of clients are great for building feedback on platforms like Upwork, and then also a body of work that you can begin to link to. And then instead of you constantly going out and chasing these clients, they eventually come to you. And it's at this point that you can begin to pick and choose your projects. So instead of having to take on every Tom, Dick, and Harry, you can say, okay, Tom, I'll take you on. Okay, Dick, I'll take you on. Okay, Harry, I won't take you on. You can say, okay, am I a good fit for this project? Instead of thinking, I need this project, I'm going to have to slog it out, maybe over 3 months or so. If you do all the tough ones, you can become a little bit more selective. And I see this with my own students. They ask so many questions about, when they're just starting out, about client projects, because the client is just wringing them dry. We need this. They're so demanding. But what my students, they're doing it, but what they don't realize is they are learning at 10x, if not 100x, the rate that they would going through a design course, because they're in the field and they're getting all these client requests, real client requests. They're asking all the professionals around them, how do you do this? They learn it, they implement it, and they internalize it. And then over, let's say, 3 to 4 months, they land their first 1K or 2K client. And then they already know this stuff. So their questions get more high level, but less in terms of volume. So they ask less questions, but more pertinent questions, because they've internalized this entire library of potential client queries, and they can serve higher and higher level clients. So to come right back to, the initial question is the web design market saturated? Well, no, but you need to get out to that 20%, so that bottom 20% as quickly as possible. Going through everything that we've been through here, you should be able to do that within, I would say, 2 to 3 months as a maximum. If you're not out by then you need to look back at the process and say, okay, what could I have done better? Could my pitches be better? Could my body of work be better? Could my client communication be better? There's lots of different things, lots of different levers that you can pull, variables you can change to sort of ascertain what went wrong. It shouldn't do, but there are things that you can fall back on to check and to tweak for the next 3 months when you try and escape that bottom 20% again. Now, I don't think AI is going to completely wipe it all out overnight. Might be a few years. Maybe I'm being optimistic, maybe 1 or 2 years. So you've got time. So if you're watching this right now, hopefully you're not watching it in 2 years' time. But if you're watching it right now, there is so much opportunity and so many ways to sort of climb the ladder. Now, the last thing that you need to do is pick a platform to specialize in. There's Squarespace, which I specialize in a lot, maybe 85% of my students specialize in. But you don't have to. You could do Wix, you could do WordPress, you could do Webflow, Framer. You could do Shopify, Drupal. There's so many different places where you can excel. But the best thing that you can do is pick one and stick to it and become the go-to guy or girl on that platform. When someone searches, for instance, Squarespace on, I think it's ChatGPT, like who's the best Squarespace designer? Not necessarily because I am the best Squarespace designer, but because my name is associated with Squarespace in every corner of the internet, I come up. I think I'm page 1 on Google for Squarespace website designer in the US. Weirdly, not in the UK, but in the US. You should be aiming to do that for whatever platform that you're on. So your name, your brand should be synonymous with the platform. Become the specialist, and there's no way that you'll ever get outclassed by competitors or outperformed by AI. So all that to say, don't worry about the market being saturated, because it's just not.